Hey, everybody. We've got Rachel Lebowitz with Driven Spouse Forum. We dive into the types of communication between a driven visionary and their spouses. Rachel explains the narcissistic personalities and the fantasies we hook ourselves into. And Rachel shows us behind the curtain of the assessment she's gifting to us today. Check it out. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I'm Brandon Strauss, and I believe that life gives to the giver. And today we've got Rachel Lebowitz of Driven Spouse Forum to help you lead with the give. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for having me. This is going to be fun.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. And we've already had some amazing conversation, some intimate conversation just about family and values and how that grows and goes. But before we get too deep into this, and as opposed to waiting until the end of the show for our members, where's the best place for them to connect with you outside of the give, which we'll tease at the end of the show?
So they can find me at www.drivenspouseforum.com. That's
Beautiful,
how you
beautiful.
find me.
And then we'll make sure that we put that in the show notes and head on over there. And then also with the give, we'll make sure that they can connect with you through that and then back to the platform. So, you know,
There's
our
always, there's always LinkedIn, Instagram, you know.
all the other places, but I'm going to recommend, just because I know, head on over there. There's a lot of great stuff that I've already seen on there. And even I signed up for the newsletter. And so I'm getting, weekly, implementation and stuff that Rachel's been giving out. And I greatly appreciate that. So head on over there and we'll make sure that we get that in our show notes. But, when I look at information, because we were just talking about where can people find you and that you have information out there, our ability or availability to gain access to information has really changed in the last 2 or 3 years. When we were in our younger years, it was our friends, family, teachers, people around us. And then, if we look at beyond the Googles, the YouTubes, and the search engines, how has your learning changed from your early years versus today?
Well, I started off going to college, long distance college. So you had to go buy books in the library or at the store, read, write up assessments, and email it to your professor. And when I look back at that today, I'm like, wow, like today there's Zoom, you know? So that was like, we we get so much information so much faster, but there is information overload and you don't know fact checking, like what's true, right? Um, I think like we used to have to go to college and libraries for information. Now information is at our fingertips. Stimulation is at our fingertips. Connection is at our fingertips. And a question I've been asking myself recently, are we less family oriented because we have so much connection available at our fingertips?
I'd love to go a little bit deeper on that one because, are we less? I'm taking notes right there, and I'm a family person. We talked about our families beforehand, and are we less family oriented? Are you coming from the aspect of like, oh, we have our cell phones at the table, or we have technology, and we're always like looking up? Because I can tell you, I've seen that. And
Yes,
I
but even more than that, like it used to be like a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something. It was like everybody was looking forward to it. It was on the calendar. You were thinking about it. Now it's like I connect to all my people. So like all my aunts and uncles are on social media. All my
Mhm.
friends are on social media. So I'm like, I see them all the time. So I should go to the wedding to meet them. Oh, I'll miss the wedding.
Mm.
Like if I have
Mm.
to talk to them, then I have to get dressed. Well, I can talk to them while I'm home on my phone on Instagram.
It almost kind of sounds like, are we so connected that we're disconnected because of the amount of connectivity that we have access to that really isn't intimate or personal, but it's almost at a distance.
Exactly.
Hmm. Yeah. If we look at it like how connected slash disconnected have we become? And then if we look at the last 4 years, I'm not going down that rabbit hole of like, COVID and everything. That's not the point on there. but has technology taken us to the point to where we need to actually understand how to unplug and reconnect? And I'm pretty certain we'll kind of maybe get in that and what you do inside of your community with couples and how to actually reconnect that. But I've got to imagine, because you and I talked about this a little bit, our mindset, champion's mind, human mind. We talked about the monkey, the lizard brain and everything a little bit beforehand. As entrepreneurs, it's easy as driven spouses. Okay. I think I might have just taken that from a pretty smart person right there. As a driven spouse, it's easy to lose our footing, our confidence, and sometimes second guess ourselves. How have you developed a winning mindset, and what are some of the techniques or practices that you use to overcome self-doubt or limiting beliefs when it comes to you and we'll say your household and your spouse?
That's a loaded question. So it starts with truly knowing yourself. As a spouse of an entrepreneur, it's very easy to feel less than, in the shadow, you know, not as important. Oh, I'm just home with the kids. I'm just doing my thing. I just have a 9 to 5 job, right? But
Mm,
then, as you mentioned before we got on here, how much is it worth to have your partner hold down the fort and do everything that they're doing so you can go out and create, right? The mindset of, I think what switched for me recently was nothing is an emergency, nothing is forever, nothing is like this grand um episode. Like
mhm.
it it's an issue. That's it. Like you have an issues list. Like it's just an issue. It's not, we tend to make stories behind whatever we see. So he forgot to take out the garbage. It must be he doesn't care about me, right?
Mm. So we
Instead,
create a narrative, a story based off of a previous experience that has nothing to do with what our current emotion or state is, based off of something else, which then puts the spouse at a disadvantage because they don't even know what conversation they're really involved with at that point. Does that?
100%. We all bring our histories into the relationship. And I say, people say, oh, a half plus a half and it makes a whole. But really, a half times a half is a quarter. If we're not 100% us when we come and we're not full, if we're looking for somebody else to fill our cup, the other
Mm-hmm.
person is running away. So we're both bringing our histories. And it is a narrative, either it's a society narrative or our, childhood narrative that we bring to the table. When your spouse doesn't do something that you think fits your narrative because of how you grew up, you start making a story on that.
Oh, yeah. It's a whole nother narrative and story that we have with that right there. So keep going. I love this. Keep going. Keep going.
Exactly. Like if my dad always brought a coffee to my mom in the morning to the bed, and my husband doesn't do that, it must be he doesn't care because guys should do that, right? So now you took your guy and you put him into a jail box. He can't get it right because he is not matching the narrative that you have in your head and that you're refusing to share
Mm,
because he should know. And the same could be said the opposite way, right? Guys have narratives about who their wives should be and how they should look and what they should do. When they don't fit that narrative, we put them in a box and they can never get it right. And that's when you have two people on total different opposite sides, just not seeing each other and constantly tallying.
mm. It's like a little checkbox, like, oh, tick, 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 tick. And I gotta imagine that stuff that you integrate and you work into the community that you've built and the conversations that you're having on a monthly basis inside of there is like how to get rid of that checklist and how not to live by the past, but where we currently are and where we're going.
Yes. And the only way to do that is to examine yourself and say, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling? What is my need? If
Mm,
we aren't in touch with our needs, it's very easy to have that checklist because we're waiting for somebody else to fill that need.
mm. The conversations that need to be had that aren't had, but sit in the back of our mind that we think have already been had.
Exactly. And that's why my tagline is it takes two to have a conversation. A lot of entrepreneurs are out there, you're in that entrepreneurial world. You're part of Genius Network, YPO, EO, all these amazing things. And if your spouse isn't part of these, if she's not an entrepreneur, if she's not in that world, she's not part of that conversation. And the gift that we have today, just like we spoke about the challenges that we have today with communication and information overload, the gift that we have today is emotional intelligence is so available at our fingertips. And we have turned entrepreneurship into emotional intelligence. We can show you studies that will show the direct correlation between visionaries and founders being higher in EQ that will get them better, well run companies, better culture. Everybody understands that companies need culture and all of that in order to run. Now, what's happening is when you're going and you're learning all this information and you come back home, your spouse still sees the older version of you because they're not out there gathering all that information. So now you have somebody that's, not in a derogatory term, but somebody that's stuck in 1990 with that information on assumptions of who an entrepreneur is versus you that's, way ahead because you're a visionary, you're going 100 steps forward. So you're stuck in 2040 and you're not seeing each other. But what if we both brought you closer and we shared the information that we have in the entrepreneurial world with your spouse? We taught them those insights and emotional intelligence on communication. Take, for example, Colby, right? Every guy you and I speak to right now knows about Colby. So you understand yourself. You understand that you're a high quick start, so you have a hard time, you start projects fast, you have a low follow through, so you don't finish things fast. But when you come home and your spouse doesn't know that about you, you know yourself already. My husband came home, he took Colby and he's like, I'm never ever changing a light bulb again. And I was like, excuse me? Like you're doing so little. Now you're saying you're gonna do even less? But then when I got to understand that he's a high quick start, low follow through, he just doesn't have what it takes to stay steady and finish a project. It's not the best use of his time. Then I got to understand, okay, like if I want the best value for my relationship, that's not something I'm going to ask from him. But the only
Mm.
way I was able to do that is because I took my Colby and I realized that I'm a high fact finder. So every conversation where he got frustrated, it was because I was asking too many questions and he thought I wasn't trusting him when I just really wanted to know.
Yeah. And sometimes we can have information overload, but you were looking there for information to get clarity, which then allowed you to, get closer and have that connection on there. I think I told you this before. We just had two events at Genius over the last couple of days. And one of the things that we talked about is like, listen, if you can have your spouse in the room, super helpful. And the reason that it's helpful is behind the aspect of like, you're going to come home with all of this. And if you just data dump on them, they're going to sit there and be like, who is this crazed individual? Like you're looking to make all these changes. And it doesn't just have to be in the spouse forum or partner forum. It could also be in your employees and team members forum. And you come back with all these new great ideas, as opposed to slowly easing into them and slowly allowing them to come from where they are, because they weren't at that event. They weren't at that meeting. They weren't in that room. And if we just throw that
Correct.
out at them. Yeah, if we just purge it, that's what I had to learn in the early years of entrepreneurism. And I've been an entrepreneur for a couple decades now, but I don't think my true, because I have a slightly skewed definition of entrepreneurs, because a lot of people say I'm an entrepreneur out there, and I'm like, or do you just have a problem with authority? But really, when you do get to the truth behind that is you have to be respectful of the person that wasn't in the room and your spouse or your partner, so they understand, like, listen, hey, I'm going to ease into this conversation so you can, because you and I kind of talked about that, is allowing them to ask questions and come from their truth to see if it's something for them.
So there are a lot of spouses that don't want to be involved in their partner's business. They're like, this is your playground. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to know. So there has to be what I call like my book that I'm going to write about this, working on it. It's called What's My Role? And it's
Mm-hmm.
for spouses of entrepreneurs. And the idea is that there are three circles, is the Venn diagram.
Okay.
And one is the spouse, one is the driven entrepreneur, and one is the business. And what I focus on is the overlap. The question is, understanding the relationship between you and somebody that's wired as a driven entrepreneur. Dr. Doug Brackman, author
Mhm.
of Driven, I am now his new co-host on his podcast, and we talk a lot about the wiring of driven entrepreneurs. So if you understand that driven entrepreneurs are wired differently, that's half the battle. So then there is the overlap. What's the boundaries? What do you want to know? How does that relationship work? Then there is relationship between you and the business. And it is deciding, what do I want to know? What do I want to be involved in? What do I not want to be involved in? Then there is the business side of the business, and then there's having a business mindset and growing along with your spouse so you're on the same frequency when it
Mm.
comes to emotional intelligence. So what happens is many spouses don't want to go to these events. They don't care. They don't want to know. They don't even want you to bring it home. They're like, I'm good. I don't want you to be like, don't interfere in my space. The question to ask is, how is it going to benefit your spouse when you bring that information home? And having that conversation, not the information conversation. It's, hey, honey, I want to share with you about Colby because I can see that you would really love to know about this because this is how it's going to help you interact with me or understand you or understand the kids.
Mm. Mm. I love that. I love that. Now I'm gonna normally I might not go down this, but I don't know. I'm feeling a little giddy here. And I love how, before we got on and then now. Do you ever, when I look at, I mentioned about entrepreneurs, we have entrepreneurs and then we have entrepreneurs. And like, I sometimes think that we use the term entrepreneur as an excuse. Well, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm edgy or I'm a future, I do things differently. And we use that more of a crutch and an excuse as opposed to like just being a good human and just actually being helpful and saying, I can't. Now, I'll use this because you brought it up, but I'm not directing this at your husband and saying like I can't go change a blessed light bulb. Okay. I don't like changing light bulbs. That's why I liked renting forever ago, is because like I don't have to go change a light bulb. That's why I love when my father-in-law comes in, because we did have something that was a light bulb of an issue recently. But do you ever see that entrepreneurs use that as a crutch of saying that, here's my Colby, here's the this, and so that we use it more of as an excuse.
Absolutely, all the time. There is a mentality in the society that we live in right now where, let's say, victims get first place and they get a medal for being a victim. And I think the same thing kind of is happening to a certain degree in the entrepreneurial world. And as you said, there are many entrepreneurs that call themselves entrepreneurs. And I always wonder at what scale, right? There's a scale of entrepreneurship, and this is Gino Wickman wrote the book Elite. He's the founder of EOS and Entrepreneurial Operating System, but he created another system called eLeap, Entrepreneurial Leap. And in his book, he talks about the 6 essential traits of an entrepreneur. And I'm just going to run them through quickly because you'll see
Please.
a lot. The first one is they have to be visionary. They have to think strategically. The second one is they have to be passionate. They have to cultivate their why. Like, why am I doing this? It's not about the money. What's the greater passion? Third is they have to be a problem solver. They have to love finding solutions. They have to be driven. So they have to want to put in way more hours of work than anybody, not them, not 9 to 5ers, right?
Mhm.
They have to be a risk taker. They have to be willing to take risk. Now, many people have all these 5, but guess what the 6th one is?
I'm not even gonna guess.
Okay. It's taking responsibility,
Ugh, love it. Yeah.
acting independently, because there's so many people that mess up businesses. They're like, what can I do? I filed for bankruptcy, right? That's not a true entrepreneur. A true entrepreneur takes responsibility for their successes, their past, present, and future, for their outcomes, for their risk. You don't take risk without taking responsibility. People that don't have the responsibility factor, I find, are addicts in the closet. So they have addictive personalities because they're risk taking, they're driven, they're problem solvers, they're solving their emotional problems with businesses, right? And they're not operating at the highest level of consciousness in being a true entrepreneur. If you're not having the risk taker, I call them fractional visionaries, and I say you're good for nothing.
Yeah.
Because you're just creating a lot of messes. It's like a puppy that's not trained.
Yeah. The only one out of all of those that I hear frequently, and this is, it's the word visionary. I do believe, because that is a really, if we really think what a visionary is, there's dreamers. Children are dreamers, visionaries because of how they see the world through innocent eyes. And to me, I almost want to sit there and replace visionaries because I think that's such a strong, and I'm not saying for you, I'm just talking me personally, dreamers. Because visionaries is such like, there's very few things that we do in the entrepreneurial world that are truly visionary. We can dream, we can be passionate, we can be problem solvers, but visionary a lot of the time is hard to adopt. Like if it is such a vision, it can be, but again, it's probably semantics right there. And it's probably me hearing those entrepreneurs that are just like, they have a problem with authority. They're like, I'm a visionary. And it's like, I love the ones that I gravitate towards are that passion, the problem solver. The last one, I love it. Taking responsibility.
Are you open to rewriting the definition of visionary in your book?
Absolutely. And I love how you did that one. That makes me think of a dear friend of some of my partners, how you started that, Chris Voss. He's not a dear friend of mine, but of a couple of my partners, he is a dear friend of. And that reminds me, are you open to? I love that. I don't know where you got that, if that's just you or but brilliant. And yes.
I've gotten Black Swan.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. See. Yep. There we go.
Yep, I just
Let,
finished
let's
today.
talk. You know what? Let's just go off script because there is no script. Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, so visionary is the ability to think into the future, to see
Mhm.
it in your mind's eye. Everybody has a certain degree of visionary. I work a lot with partners as an EOS implementer. I work with partners in businesses. I work with visionaries and integrators, as we call it. So CEOs, COOs, first in command, second in command. Sometimes when
Mhm.
I sit in a room and I'm like, who's the visionary? Sometimes when it's a partnership, one partner really gets offended and they're like, I'm the visionary. And the other one is like, no, I'm the visionary. So there's a few things to take into account. Everything is on a spectrum. Okay. So how far out can you see clearly in your mind's eye? Is it a week, a month, 3 months, a year, 10 years? The higher you go, the more visionary you are. But it's not about dreaming, it's about being able to see it in your mind's eye done. I could see how it's going to happen. I exactly see what it's going to take to get there. Now,
You're pulling me over. You're starting to pull me over. You're starting to pull me over. Come on, let's get some more.
so when I have those two partners there, I'm like, what do you see in 3 years? What do you see in 3 years? And at one point, one of them says, I can't see past X. Like, I don't know. It looks blurry to me. I don't see it clearly. So that having that vision of being able to see it clearly in your mind's eye is the true definition of visionary. We all have a part of visionary in ourselves. That's how we live our life. I could see the end of the day. I could see dinner time. I could see the next week. I could see in the next month what I have to do. If you're really good and organized, you have your next 3 months planned out, right? Integrators usually have shorter vision spans, and the higher level of an integrator you are, second in command, the further out you can think. So it's about strategic planning, being able to see that big picture. Now, being able to bring it into action, bringing it down to the ground is a second in command ability, unique ability. That's a second in command's talent. Combining, and that is why exactly why Gino Wickman says having vision alone is nothing. You're like a child, you're a dreamer.
Mm.
You got to have that drive, that passion, that risk taking responsibility in order to be able to be a true visionary. So we've been throwing around the word too much. I totally agree.
Hey, number one, how you presented it to me is like, you black swanned up front. And I appreciate the heck out of it that I was able to see that, but the way that you did it allowed me, not that I had a guard up, but this is more for like the listener right now. Even if I didn't, that's going to bring my guard down because I'm like, oh, the word visionary. But the way that you went about it was like, are you open to, you know, I think one of my partners who I showed, that bag that's going to do a little burn and a little healing on me, some of the old ancient medicines. Before we're getting ready at one of our events, we, breath work we usually do before or after lunch. And it's like, are you willing to invest 5 minutes of your time?
Mm.
Are you, I'll have to get it better. Are you willing to invest 5 minutes of your time, something, whatever it is? He Chris Vosses them too. And I forget how it is. I forget. I need to ask Jason. I'd be like, how could you not? You've heard me say this 100 times. But when you go from there, then that allowed me to sit there and actually be receptive and listen to you. And it didn't take much, but I was like, I was willing to listen. This is for the listener right now, but then also sit there and be like, hey, Rachel's trying to bring something to be helpful so I can see how the word that I might, hold up against is really a word that I can sit there and be like, and I can lean into and I can believe and I can understand better. So I love what you did there. I'm not fully over or around the corner on that one, but I'm far closer to understanding with what you just did there with me, the word visionary.
Yes.
First in command, second in command. There you go. When you started going there and then the partner things, okay, because then I saw partners. You went from business partners, which probably some people might be more interested in. My brain went to like personal partners and how that goes right there. So thank you for how you presented it, how you asked it, and the time you spent on it.
Okay, so let's talk about in a partnership.
Yeah.
Great, great question. So is one partner more visionary than the other? And that is exactly why I called my forum Driven Spouse Forum and not Visionary Spouse Forum. I think that a vision in a partnership should be equal, and it's not one partner having a further vision than the other. It's about who's more driven, and that's nothing to be ashamed of too. And I think we need to combine in the entrepreneurial world the word driven and visionary, and we'll get a better definition versus only using visionary or only driven, right? That's in the entrepreneurial world. In the home life, driven, it is you can ask the question, who's more driven in your relationship? And that means who is hardwired to and actually being driven is a, a defect. It's a manufacturer setting defect of not getting the messaging in your brain and the D2D4 gene. The receptors don't get the message that you have enough dopamine. So you're
Mm,
constantly looking for more. So it's like more, 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 more. And you're like, and your spouse is looking there and they're like, you did all this in one day. You have so much stimulation. You still want to go jumping out of a plane? Like, I don't get it, right? But you need that high in order to feel alive. So then the question could be, which partner needs more of that? So that's one question to ask, right? Another question, but then sometimes, not many times, but sometimes you have partners where both partners have high quick starts, they're both driven. And that is just making a personal decision of who's sitting in the driver's seat.
mm,
Sometimes it's like who makes more money, who's in a better industry, who's the one that wants to drive the home front, who wants to drive the career and financial front, right? Sometimes it's one partner that's more dominant. They're just high, they're more dominant, they're more masculine, they're just more assertive, and they are very confident. So this idea is what I call relationship math. It comes from Ross Rosenberg, who's a psychologist, and he wrote the book, The Human Magnet Syndrome. He talks about, and he talks at an extreme level of narcissism on one end of the spectrum and codependence on the other end of the spectrum. But what I adapted to is every relationship, the math of the relationship is for a relationship to be, having that magnetic pull, that thing we call attraction, right?
mhm.
Is for one partner to be self-focused and one partner is other focused. What does that mean? That means one partner is very goal oriented. They have most probably more of an avoidant attachment style. They most probably see the world as in, they judge the world rather than other focused people are worried about how the world judges them. Other focused people are more concerned with coming through and looking nice, being needed. Feeling needed is very important to them. Versus self-focused people don't care if anybody needs them. They're very in touch with their needs. They will put themselves first. I give this example of like, you're running to a meeting, you might be 5 minutes late if you make time to grab a coffee. Do you take the coffee, run the risk of being 5 minutes late? Or do you forgo the coffee, get into the meeting, and then be upset and resentful and sit there because you didn't have your coffee? Which one are you? Right? This is usually self focus versus other focus. And you need one of each in order to create a magnetic pull in a relationship. The challenge of that is that the self focused person might be so self absorbed that they don't see the other person and they end up having low empathy. They can't fathom what it is like to be in the other person's seat. Versus the other focused person is so busy giving and giving and giving that they forget about themselves and they are resentful. This is a classic dynamic, usually in a traditional marriage between a husband and a wife.
Mm.
Now, add being driven on top of that. The husband wants to get all these businesses going, they're very driven. They could see their spouse as an obstacle to their goal. You're asking me to be home. You're asking me to be more present. But I want to go out there and build these things and grow these passions. And that's where those interests divide and that gap happens.
Mm. The intention intervention gap. I love it. I love it. And since we're in the area of where we're talking about the driven spouse forum, driven the words driven visionary just keep sitting in my head. Driven visionary, driven visionary. I love that. Typically when someone invests in their future, they have a better than vague idea of what they're going to get out of it, who's going to be in the room, what the expectations and what some outcomes could be. What should people expect when they enter your reality with the Driven Spouse Forum?
Sure. So the Driven Spouse Forum is based on the idea that when driven entrepreneurs are hyper focused on winning and their goals, this is the idea of Dr. Doug Brackman in his book talks about the entrepreneurial, the driven, he calls it the narcissistic fantasy. And this is the idea that people that are driven have this fantasy in their head that if only I will do XYZ, life will be perfect. If only I will sell my business for 35 million, if only I'll get that big house, if only I'll get that car, if only I will meditate every day for 10 minutes. It could be whatever you want, but we hook our hopes onto a fantasy. If we get that, then life will be perfect, right? And that causes somebody to be self-focused because you will mow down anything in your way. So it's built on the idea of understanding that it takes two to have a conversation. You have to be able to get out of your self-focusedness and look at your spouse and say, but hey, who is this person in the room with me on this journey? What do they love? What do they want? Who are they as a person? Irrelevant in our relationship. And when both people come together to the table from that aspect, so the spouse says, who is this driven entrepreneur? What is he wired like? What does he look like? Because it's very easy to become narcissistic when you're sitting in the victim seat, when you're sitting in the seat of like, I'm always second, I don't get to have what I want because I am holding down the fort. The highest level of codependence looks like narcissism. What that means is when somebody is in a relationship where they become the one that is always giving and expecting in return and not getting in return, they can either become over controlling or turn into a victim mentality of like, I'm home, I'm not doing enough, I am doing everything, he's doing nothing. That turns into a certain hyper focusedness on your void.
Mm.
Now you have two people, one person is hyper focused on their needs and one person is hyper focused on their void, and then you're back in that gap, right? So what they can expect, part of being driven spouse form, part of being in it is twofold. Number one is to bridge those gaps. There is the knowledge gap. So we spoke about, your entrepreneur is going out there, gaining a lot of knowledge on emotional intelligence, how to communicate, because we know that the world today, entrepreneurship is all about communication, culture, all these tools, they change you who you are as a person. It used to be that entrepreneurship was more blue collar. You just went out there, you did the work, you came home, you didn't speak to anybody, and you made some money. Now it's like we're being part of societies. It's a total societal change. So bringing that knowledge to the spouses in a way where the spouses are interested in hearing it, that's the knowledge gap. Second is the interest gap. So the interests, visionaries have different interests than their spouses. Visionary wants to, build those big businesses, constantly drive. I always ask driven entrepreneurs, do you ever plan to retire?
I'm going to answer it even though you weren't directly asking me. Probably no. Even in my later years, whether I am mentoring or, if we've sold off the companies and our ownership, I don't, I doubt I would ever fully retire. I'll always be doing something.
And then I ask, does your spouse know about that?
Yes, my spouse knows about that.
So many
Very, very aware of that one.
So many spouses are not aware, and they have this fantasy that because driven entrepreneur is selling a vision to their spouse, and they're saying, "Look, right now I'm hustling, but when I hit this number, we're going to sell the business, and I'll be all there for you." And then what happens when they get 90% close to that goal? They move the goalpost.
We moved the goal. You saw me go. If you're
Yep.
just listening to this, my hand went from here to whoop. Yep. Hold the
And
rug.
now the spouse is, but wait, what happened to that vacation? What happened to that house that you promised? Oh, honey, I had to reinvest the money. Well, on one hand, yes, sure, because you're driven. On the other hand, no, you didn't, right? So there is that interest gap. What if we change the conversation? We said, look, I'm never going to retire. I want to do all these things. What do you need to be your best self? Well, I get to be my best self.
Mm. Mm.
So I want to explore my passions. I want to plan a 2-week vacation every year. I want you to do Sunday tennis with me, right? So bridging that interest gap. And that is why I created that assessment that we're going to give, because that can be the start of the conversation.
Mm.
Have you ever thought, like, what's your spouse's what's her style of dressing? Is it classy? Is it trendy? Is it sporty? Oh, wait, I never thought about that. Like, why would it be important? Just so you know, and that when you pass, like you're in the airport store and you see a pretty sweater, you can say, "Oh, I took a picture of that because I thought you would love it."
I occasionally do that, not all the time, but like it's usually like after I've gotten my hair cut, there's some stores that are around it. I'm like, hey, and I have done that just unknowingly because I don't mind. I love going shop. I know we're not saying like, do I like, but like, yeah, I get it. Those small little things right there. Again, for the listener, okay, not telling you anything you might not already know. Well, what Rachel said right there, if it's not natural coming from you, then that's okay. Well, that's not my style. That's okay. But knowing the fact that it could have a positive outcome or emotion or connection between you and your spouse or your partner, it's not about you at that point, whether that is your jam or not. It's time to take that down and not use that. This isn't my Colby or whatever it is. Take that wall down and do it for them.
What's the highest level of love?
I've heard this question before. Why don't you just, I'm not
So
even going to.
true love is if you know your spouse loves pizza and you really don't like pizza, it's getting your spouse pizza. Why? Because if you got your spouse a steak and they like a steak, but you like a steak too, you're deriving some satisfaction from
Mm-hmm.
that for your spouse. Like we're having a steak for two, right? I'm enjoying it, you're enjoying it. But if you despise pizza and you get your wife pizza, they get to enjoy it 100%. That is the ultimate level of love. So when you understand what the other person likes, wants, needs, is interested in, and you can mirror it back to that person. And by the way, what I was gonna say is you don't have to go and buy that sweater. Just sending that picture and being like, I thought of you when I saw this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's spouses have a need to be seen. Visionaries and driven entrepreneurs want to be seen for their drivenness. Their spouse wants to be seen for who they are. If they're driven, not driven, if they have passions, things that interest them. Maybe they like a certain type of novel or movie, right? So how well do you know your spouse so you can enter their world?
It's the small things. And all of this I gravitate towards. You maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, I'm like, ah, but no, it truly is. And as we've got a few questions left as we're coming to the end here. But what I will say, and this is me just looking internally, like in the mirror, it might not be natural up front, but as time goes on, if you continue to say, hey, I need to make myself a note to go do something, I have reminders to do things. That's okay. I set those things up because it's not my highest and best use, or it's not where my brain is really going. But eventually, I don't have to set some of those reminders. Why? Because it becomes part of who I am, how I breathe, how I want to communicate. But too often, I think we sit there and say, well, I'm an entrepreneur, so I can't do this. Make yourself a note, just a reminder. It doesn't lessen the value. If it's like, hey, reminder, buy so and so flowers, there's nothing wrong with that. Eventually, you might not need that, but that does show the love and the caring, and that you were putting them first. Again, I'm speaking internally, and I can tell you, I didn't do it for the longest time, and I don't always do the best job of it. But that right there, everything you just went over on the on just a snippet of what individuals get inside the Driven Spouse Forum, it's so important. It can fast track you. I know this. Everything Rachel was talking right there, I could have saved myself 10 to 15 years of pain
Yeah.
and those around me. I'll leave it with that. But again, it wasn't the other person. It was like, I'm responsible for myself, and knowing my shortcomings, and even though they aren't shortcomings, but knowing where it isn't my brain goes to, set up the reminders, do the things, and think of the other person, even if you have to use a cheat code. My cheat code was eventually using my one of my team members, and then also setting calendar reminders to do certain things.
Absolutely. I say you can start with like a lot of spouses are like they work all day and I don't hear from them. So I say make yourself like an alarm on your phone. Call your wife every day, same time. It's okay. This is our check-in time.
Yeah.
And we did that for a long time. And now it's natural that we both check in on each other. Um, but your spouse having a passion outside of your partnership is super important because you don't want your spouse to sit there and wait there by the phone for that phone call,
No,
right?
no,
So that's
no.
why it's so important for spouses to find themselves. And that's a lot. That was the second part that I was going to get to about Driven Spouse Forum. It's a place for spouses to rediscover who they are. Who are you in your essence? What smell do you like? So I sent them this beautiful box of scented candles, and I tell them their first challenge is to light every candle and decide what's their favorite scent. And then I send them this box of beautiful chocolates, and I say, taste every one and say, what's my favorite taste of chocolate? And that it's literally sometimes starting from the basics and saying,
Mm,
who am I? What do I love to do? Because when we know ourselves, we can ask for our needs in an assertive way. We don't come through passive aggressive and resentful because we know who we are.
mm,
And I think every strong guy wants a wife that knows themselves on the deepest level. And what my wish for Driven Spouse Forum is, I'm just going to put it out there, is that there's going to be so much data that's going to be built. Imagine if we could take this data and turn it into something. So the more you get to know about each other, if we have databases of all that, imagine if it would create a personal gift guide, if it would create reminders for anniversaries, birthdays, and all that, because you're doing the work and then you're depositing it into actionable data.
mm. Yeah, that's huge right there. that there really is. We could continue going on. But I got a few questions that I want to make sure that we get out before we come to the end here. I believe that there's always new ideas brewing in times of prosperity. It's like easy to find the wins when everyone is winning and the world is winning. But I believe that ingenuity and creativity come when we feel the squeeze.
Hmm.
What are you working on right now that's going to take place over the next 12 months that excites you?
I am super excited about scaling Driven Spouse Forum into a place where it's accessible to more entrepreneurs and their spouses, where spouses feel like they have a home, where it's not connected to any particular mastermind that spouses are, that Drivens are in. So it's not like contingent on being part of any Driven membership, because a lot
Hmm.
of times spouses feel like, oh, I only get in if my husband's part of EO, and there's that. Um, I am really excited about writing my book on being the spouse of an entrepreneur. I'm really excited, and the same mentality, and we didn't talk about this on this podcast, but the same mentality and the same psychology can be seen for COOs and
Hmm.
so I launched Empowered COO. My book is coming out very soon. And that is a formula for how second in commands could grow their confidence, where they don't feel like they're lost in the shadow of a driven visionary. So it's the same formula, two different demographics. So that plus being the co-host on Dr. Doug Brackman's podcast, Driven, is super exciting. A lot of good stuff happening. I just have to manage my time well.
Yeah, that's a big that and there was a lot to uncover there, and we'll make sure that if anyone has of interest and they want to connect, that they can through that. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that's going, and what comes of that, especially the book. You had mentioned, the book that you're currently writing and what that looks like. But to touch on one last piece right there, the formula, I can see it, how the formula for partners, spouses, whatever, wherever we want to put that in the domain, and then partners when it comes to the first in command, second in command in a company, like how it is that they need to communicate and realize the value of what each person is bringing to the table, no matter what position, what gear that we're in, that it is, I've got to imagine it's a pretty similar formula that overlaps. It's just different. We're in different domains and changing the names a little bit, but there's that first and second in command.
100%.
Yeah. No, no, no. I love it. I love it. All right. Last one. I always believe in leading with the give mentality. It's the principle in which I've based every company partnership. And uncoincidentally, it's the name of the podcast, The Give. We ask that every guest gives us a little sneak peek behind the doors of what their give will be that you'll be able to find inside the Knowledge Center over at TSF. What have you brought to give to the listeners today, Rachel?
I created a quiz that's called How Well Do You Know Your Spouse? And it's not findable unless you have the direct link to it. So I am
I'm giving
excited,
thumbs up, like, whatever right there.
but I'm thinking as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking that I think I should give you also the link to the first month's content of the Driven Spouse Forum to make that public for your give. I think that is super powerful.
I love it. I love it even more now, and I love it even more when it's able to make an impact on that driven entrepreneur, that driven spouse, and how it can help connect them. As we become more divided, more divisive, more moving further away from things. Yep, this is happening live. So if you hear a beep in the background, apparently some fire alarm thing is happening in the background. I don't know what's going on, but it's time to do this as opposed to dividing. How do we come together and have the conversations that need to be had, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with a partner, or whether it's with your team members? At the end of the day, it starts with a conversation and coming from your truth where you're at now, but not from a truth of something that is in the past, meeting them where they're at. And that's really a lot of the one of the takeaways that I have, at least from today, is meeting the person where they're at and being honest with where you're at when you're having that conversation with that driven spouse, that driven partner, or just the people that were around.
Yep, 100%. And that's why I'm going to create a web page that's going to have the video and then the assessment under it. So hang tight. I will put it on my website, not make it findable to the public, but I think that's the give.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. We'll make sure that the team behind the scenes, when you have it ready and it's in there, we've got that in the show notes. So it's like it happened today, even if it's in the future, we'll have that out there. We've got Rachel Lebowitz of Driven Spouse Forum. Rachel, thank you so much for spending the time. I love it. We could probably go on for a little bit longer, a lot bit longer, just because of the fact of, this is happening. It's like a living, breathing thing every day. And this is really important, is to have those conversations. I can tell you, I've screwed them up 10 different ways from Sunday, but to have this in your life and making sure that you move forward, it's something that can propel you and your spouse to all new levels in communication and knowing where you're going.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you
Rachel.
so
Thank you
much
so
for having,
much.
thank you so much for having me. This was great.